Hey everybody, we are back for 5 and 25. This is episode 2 and we're talking about Genesis chapter 3. Again, just go first book of the Bible, go to the 3rd chapter, and here you are. And everything's great after chapters 1 and 2. God creates this beautiful place and everything's peaceful. But then the big idea of chapter 3 is here comes the curse. All right, and it starts because God says you can eat from any tree in the garden, but don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And sure enough, we don't know if it was an apple or not, but Eve eats it and Adam eats it and then brings on the curse. Now, if you look through the rest of the chapter, you start seeing these different things start happening. One, there's temptation that takes place. You'll notice they're blaming each other. Death is the beginning of their physical death, but also death to a relationship with God happens right in here. There's conflict. They're hiding from God. Even in the marriage, so the marriage relationship was established in Genesis chapter 2, but now there's going to be this conflict and struggle in that. There's struggle in the work that Adam's going to do and pain and suffering. So almost everything that we don't like about the world happens because of the curse. Now, a couple of things just to point out here that just kind of a little backdrop to help you understand the idea is that when God made man in his image, he gave them free will. So they have the opportunity to choose to obey or disobey, and we see that. What we also don't know, this might be confusing, there's this serpent in there. So what's the deal with the serpent? Well, God also made angelic beings or other spiritual beings, and the serpent is one of those, and he made angelic beings with free will. Some of those angels chose to rebel, and that's where we see the serpent. He's also known as Satan in the Bible. We'll find out more about that later. And one of the words right at the end of this chapter, cherubim, that would be one of the angels that's chosen to continue to follow and serve God. All right, so that's a little background on that. I want to close out by telling you about the love of God, because the love of God shows up in this chapter too. Different in a couple of ways. Number one, if you noticed, Adam and Eve, when they had disobeyed and sinned, they tried to cover themselves and hide by putting on fig leaves. Well, if you notice later, God comes and he says, here, I'm going to give you clothing. And he sacrifices an animal to do that. And so there's this blood sacrifice that takes place. We're going to hear a ton more about that in the future. And so just note that he covers them, gives them a more acceptable covering. And then in the 15th verse, so Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, he is going to talk about this future thing that's going to happen. The offspring of the woman is going to come and crush the head of the serpent or of Satan. And we'll hear more about that later too, but this is also the first time that there's this prophecy of some future rescue that's going to take place. The last one, so the other tree, he said, the other tree that's mentioned specifically in the garden is the tree of life. Now, none of these trees look very good. It's my orchard that's just barely surviving. But there was fruit in the tree of life, and God actually sent an angel to block the garden so that they would not eat from the tree of life and live forever. And I'm going to say this is an act of love by God, because at this point, they were going to live in this cursed, sinful world forever and never die. But God says, no, I don't want you to live forever in this cursed world. I have another world planned. Now, spoiler alert, at the end of this, when we get to day 25 or video episode 25, we're going to see that the tree of life comes back, and it's in a new heaven and a new earth, and God's going to make things all right once again and remove the curse. But that's coming later. For now, just remember that the curse enters mankind here in Genesis chapter 3, and that God still, in the midst of the curse, is showing his love towards people. And specifically, he's going to call a person in episode number 3, as you're going to see a man named Abraham. So I'll see you on the next video. God bless.